Question 1. The investigation demonstrates that a researcher is preparing to perform a stereotactic surgery on rodents to implant an electrode into a specific brain region. The researcher has outlined the basic steps but has not detailed the specific anesthetic agents, analgesia protocols, or postoperative monitoring parameters. As a laboratory animal technician, what is the most appropriate action to ensure the ethical and regulatory compliance of this procedure? Option A. Inform the researcher that the protocol lacks sufficient detail and suggest they proceed with their best judgment, as the LAT's role is primarily technical execution. Option B. Proceed with the surgery as planned by the researcher, documenting any observed deviations from standard practice for later review by the IACUC. Option C. Immediately halt the procedure and consult with the attending veterinarian and the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC, to ensure the protocol is fully detailed and compliant with the guide for the care and use of laboratory animals and institutional SOPs before proceeding. Option D. Proceed with the surgery using standard anesthetic and analgesic protocols commonly employed for rodent stereotactic procedures, assuming the researcher's oversight is sufficient. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the surgery using standard anesthetic and analgesic protocols commonly employed for rodent stereotactic procedures, assuming the researcher's oversight is sufficient. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the laboratory animal technician, LAT, to balance the immediate needs of a research protocol with the ethical and regulatory obligations to minimize animal pain and distress during surgical procedures. The LAT must possess a thorough understanding of common surgical techniques, their potential complications, and the appropriate postoperative care to ensure animal welfare and data integrity, all within the framework of the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, the Guide, and relevant institutional policies. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the animal's well-being by ensuring all necessary preoperative, intraoperative, and postoperative measures are in place, as mandated by the Guide. This includes appropriate anesthesia and analgesia, aseptic technique, skilled surgical execution, and diligent monitoring. Adhering to these principles minimizes pain, suffering, and the risk of complications, thereby upholding ethical standards and the integrity of the research data. An incorrect approach that neglects proper aseptic technique would be professionally unacceptable due to the high risk of surgical site infections, leading to animal suffering, potential loss of animals, and compromised research outcomes. This directly violates the Guide's emphasis on preventing infection and ensuring animal health. Another incorrect approach that fails to provide adequate postoperative analgesia would be ethically and regulatorily unsound, as it would cause unnecessary pain and distress to the animal, contravening the Guide's directives on pain management. Lastly, an approach that bypasses established protocols for anesthesia monitoring would be dangerous, potentially leading to anesthetic complications, animal loss, and a failure to meet the standards of care outlined in the Guide. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive review of the approved protocol and relevant institutional standard operating procedures, SOP. This should be followed by a thorough assessment of the animal's health status, confirmation of all necessary supplies and equipment, and consultation with veterinary staff if any uncertainties exist regarding anesthetic or surgical procedures. Continuous vigilance and adherence to aseptic principles throughout the procedure, coupled with meticulous postoperative monitoring and pain management, are paramount. Question 2. Upon reviewing the daily health monitoring logs for a specific rodent colony, you observe a cluster of animals exhibiting lethargy, ruffled fur, and decreased food intake, which are not typical signs for this strain or age group. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to optimize the management of this potential health issue? Option A. Continue to monitor the animals closely for another 24 hours to see if the symptoms resolve on their own before taking any further action. Option B. Immediately isolate the affected animals from the rest of the colony, document all observations meticulously, and promptly notify the attending veterinarian and the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC, according to established institutional protocols. Option C. Euthanize all animals in the affected room as a precautionary measure to prevent any potential spread of disease. Option D. Initiate a broad-spectrum antibiotic treatment based on your experience, without consulting the veterinarian, to preemptively address any potential bacterial infection. Correct answer is B. Immediately isolate the affected animals from the rest of the colony, document all observations meticulously, and promptly notify the attending veterinarian and the institutional animal care and use committee, IACUC, according to established institutional protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in laboratory animal care, identifying and responding to potential disease outbreaks efficiently and effectively while adhering to strict regulatory requirements. The technician must balance the immediate need to protect the colony's health with the imperative to follow established protocols and ensure accurate record-keeping. The professional challenge lies in the potential for rapid disease spread, the ethical obligation to prevent animal suffering, and the legal ramifications of non-compliance with animal welfare regulations. The correct approach prioritizes immediate, yet controlled, action based on established protocols. This involves isolating suspected animals, notifying the veterinarian and IACUC promptly, and initiating diagnostic procedures. This aligns with best professional practice by demonstrating a proactive and responsible approach to animal health management. It directly addresses the potential for disease spread, minimizes animal suffering, and ensures that regulatory bodies are informed and involved in the decision-making process, thereby upholding ethical and legal obligations. An incorrect approach that involves delaying notification or attempting to self-treat without veterinary consultation is professionally unacceptable. Such actions represent a failure to adhere to regulatory frameworks that mandate prompt reporting of animal health issues and veterinary oversight. Ethically, it risks prolonging animal suffering and potentially exacerbating the disease outbreak. Furthermore, it undermines the integrity of the research by potentially compromising animal welfare and data validity. Another incorrect approach, such as immediately euthanizing all animals without proper diagnosis or veterinary guidance, is also ethically and regulatorily unsound. This would be an extreme and unjustified response that violates principles of humane care and the requirement for a veterinary diagnosis before such measures are considered. It also fails to investigate the cause, hindering future prevention efforts. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic approach. 1. Observe and document all signs of illness. 2. Immediately consult established institutional protocols for disease reporting and response. 3. Promptly notify the attending veterinarian and the institutional animal care and use committee, IACUC. 4. Follow veterinary guidance for isolation, diagnostic testing, and treatment. 5. Maintain meticulous records of all observations, actions, and communications. This structured process ensures that all regulatory and ethical obligations are met while prioritizing the health and welfare of the animals. Question 3. Quality control measures reveal that a specific animal housing room, maintained under a protocol approved by the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC, and governed by the Public Health Service, PHS, policy, is consistently experiencing temperature fluctuations outside the parameters specified in the approved protocol. As a laboratory animal technician, you have observed this trend over several days. What is the most appropriate immediate action to take? Option A. Adjust the environmental controls yourself to bring the temperature within the approved protocol range without informing anyone. Option B. Document the temperature fluctuations thoroughly and immediately report them to the principal investigator and the institutional animal care and use committee, IACUC. Option C. Make a note of the temperature fluctuations in your daily log but take no further action, assuming the issue will resolve on its own. Option D. Continue to monitor the temperature without documenting or reporting, as the fluctuations are not yet severe enough to cause immediate distress to the animals. Correct answer is B. Document the temperature fluctuations thoroughly and immediately report them to the principal investigator and the institutional animal care and use committee, IACUC. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge because it requires a laboratory animal technician, LAT, to identify and address a potential deviation from established protocols that could impact animal welfare and research integrity. The LAT is in a position of direct observation and has a responsibility to ensure compliance with the Public Health Service, PHS, policy on humane care and use of laboratory animals. The challenge lies in determining the appropriate course of action when a discrepancy is noted, balancing the need for immediate intervention with the established reporting structure. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves documenting the observation and immediately reporting it to the principal investigator, PI, and the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC. This aligns directly with the PHS policy's emphasis on oversight and accountability. The PHS policy mandates that institutions establish and enforce standards for humane care and use, and the IACUC is the primary body responsible for this oversight. Reporting deviations allows the IACUC to investigate, determine if a protocol violation has occurred, and implement corrective actions. This ensures that animal welfare is maintained and that research is conducted ethically and in compliance with federal regulations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Failing to document the observation and report it to the PI and IACUC is a direct violation of the PHS policy's requirement for oversight and reporting of animal welfare concerns. This inaction allows a potential problem to persist, potentially compromising animal welfare and research validity. Attempting to correct the deviation without consulting the PI or IACUC bypasses the established oversight mechanisms. The PHS policy requires that any changes to approved protocols be reviewed and approved by the IACUC. Unauthorized modifications can lead to noncompliance and jeopardize the integrity of the research. Assuming the deviation is minor and will resolve itself without intervention ignores the potential for escalation and the ethical imperative to proactively address animal welfare issues. The PHS policy emphasizes a proactive approach to animal care and the reporting of any concerns. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to regulatory requirements and ethical principles. This involves 1. Accurate observation and documentation of any deviations from approved protocols or established standards. 2. Immediate communication of these observations to the appropriate authorities, typically the PI and the IACUC, as mandated by the PHS policy. 3. Following established institutional procedures for reporting and addressing animal welfare concerns. 4. Understanding the roles and responsibilities of all parties involved in animal research, including the LAT, PI, and IACUC, as outlined in the PHS policy. Question 4. Examination of the data shows that a research protocol requires daily monitoring of a specific physiological parameter in a colony of rodents. Considering ALAC standards for animal welfare and scientific integrity, which of the following approaches to data collection best aligns with best practices? Option A. Conducting manual measurements daily, requiring brief but frequent physical restraint of each animal. Option B. Implementing a validated, non-invasive telemetry system that transmits data wirelessly, minimizing handling and restraint. Option C. Utilizing a novel, unvalidated measurement technique that appears promising but has not been tested on this species. Option D. Recording the physiological parameter only once per week to reduce the frequency of animal handling. Correct answer is B. Implementing a validated, non-invasive telemetry system that transmits data wirelessly, minimizing handling and restraint. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in laboratory animal care, balancing the need for accurate data collection with the ethical imperative to minimize animal distress. The challenge lies in identifying the most appropriate method for monitoring a specific physiological parameter in a way that aligns with ALAC standards, which emphasize animal well-being and scientific validity. Careful judgment is required to select a method that is both scientifically sound and ethically responsible, avoiding unnecessary stress or pain to the animals. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the use of validated, non-invasive methods for data collection whenever possible, directly aligning with ALAC emphasis on minimizing animal pain and distress. ALAC standards, particularly those derived from the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, advocate for the 3 Rs: replacement, reduction, refinement. Choosing a method that avoids physical restraint or invasive procedures directly embodies the principle of refinement. This approach ensures that the data collected is reliable while upholding the highest ethical standards for animal welfare. An incorrect approach that involves frequent, manual restraint for data collection fails to meet ALAC standards by potentially causing significant stress and discomfort to the animals. This violates the principle of refinement, as less stressful alternatives exist. Another incorrect approach that relies on a method not validated for the specific species or physiological parameter compromises scientific integrity, which AALAC also expects. While aiming for data collection, this method may yield unreliable results, undermining the purpose of the research and potentially leading to unnecessary animal use. A third incorrect approach that neglects to document the method of data collection or any observed animal distress is a failure in record-keeping and transparency, both of which are crucial for AALAC accreditation and for demonstrating responsible animal care. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough review of available literature and established protocols for the specific species and experimental procedure. It requires considering the potential impact of each data collection method on animal welfare, weighing the scientific necessity against the ethical implications. When multiple methods are available, the least invasive and least stressful option that still yields scientifically valid data should be selected. Furthermore, any chosen method must be clearly documented, and any observed signs of animal distress should be meticulously recorded and addressed according to established veterinary and ethical guidelines. This systematic approach ensures compliance with regulatory frameworks like AALAC and upholds the highest standards of animal care. Question 5. Performance analysis shows a slight but consistent increase in the incidence of respiratory distress in a specific colony of mice over the past quarter. What is the most appropriate next step in the preventative health care protocol? Option A. Conduct a detailed risk assessment to identify potential contributing factors and develop targeted interventions. Option B. Immediately implement a broad increase in environmental enrichment and dietary supplements for all animals in the facility. Option C. Maintain the current preventative health care protocol, as the observed increase is not yet a significant concern. Option D. Focus on increasing the budget for therapeutic treatments for respiratory issues in anticipation of future outbreaks. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed risk assessment to identify potential contributing factors and develop targeted interventions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in laboratory animal care, balancing the need for robust preventative health care with the practical constraints of resource allocation and potential impact on research outcomes. The technician must interpret performance data, identify potential risks, and propose a course of action that aligns with regulatory requirements, ethical considerations, and the institution's operational goals. The challenge lies in moving beyond a reactive approach to disease management towards a proactive, risk-based strategy that is both effective and efficient. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic risk assessment. This aligns with the principles of good laboratory practice and the ethical imperative to minimize animal suffering and ensure animal welfare by analyzing the performance data to identify trends and potential risk factors, e.g., increased incidence of a specific condition, environmental fluctuations, changes in supplier. The technician can proactively implement targeted preventative measures. This approach is supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate the development and implementation of health monitoring programs and the use of the least burdensome methods to achieve desired outcomes. It demonstrates a commitment to animal well-being by anticipating problems before they arise, thereby reducing the need for therapeutic interventions and potential research disruptions. Incorrect approaches analysis. Continuing with the existing protocol without further investigation represents a failure to adapt to changing circumstances and a potential violation of the principle of continuous improvement mandated by many animal welfare regulations. If performance data indicates a decline in health or an increased risk, maintaining the status quo is a failure to adequately monitor and respond to the needs of the animals. Implementing a broad, across-the-board increase in all preventative measures without specific justification based on the performance analysis is inefficient and potentially burdensome. It may lead to unnecessary stress on the animals, increased costs, and could interfere with research protocols without a clear benefit. This approach lacks the targeted, risk-based decision-making required for effective and ethical animal care, focusing solely on the cost implications of potential disease outbreaks without a thorough assessment of the actual risks identified in the performance data is an incomplete approach. While cost-effectiveness is a consideration, it must be balanced with the primary responsibility for animal welfare and adherence to regulatory standards. This approach prioritizes financial concerns over the health and well-being of the animals, Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this situation by first thoroughly reviewing the performance analysis data. This involves identifying specific trends, anomalies, and potential correlations. Following this, a risk assessment should be conducted, evaluating the likelihood and potential impact of identified risks on animal health and research integrity. Based on this assessment, targeted preventative health care strategies should be developed and proposed, considering their feasibility, efficacy, and alignment with institutional policies and regulatory requirements. Continuous monitoring and evaluation of the implemented strategies are crucial for ongoing refinement and adaptation. Question 6. Operational review demonstrates that a research protocol, approved by the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC, is being modified in practice by the principal investigator, PI, to include a slightly different anesthetic agent, which the PI believes will reduce post-procedural discomfort for the animals. As a laboratory animal technician, you observe this deviation from the approved protocol. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Implement the perceived improvement without any consultation, as it seems to be in the animal's best interest and aligns with good practice. Option B. Immediately report the observed deviation to the principal investigator and the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC. Option C. Continue with the modified procedure as it appears to benefit the animals and discuss it with colleagues to gauge their opinions. Option D. Inform the principal investigator about the deviation and suggest they seek approval for the change, but continue with the original approved protocol until formal approval is granted. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the observed deviation to the principal investigator and the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate needs of a research project with the long-term ethical obligations to animal welfare and regulatory compliance. The technician is faced with a situation where a deviation from an approved protocol might seem beneficial for the research outcome, but could compromise animal well-being and violate established ethical review processes. Careful judgment is required to uphold the integrity of the ethical review system and ensure that animal use is justified and humane. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the observed issue to the principal investigator and the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC. This aligns with the core principles of ethical review processes, which mandate transparency and oversight. The IACUC is the designated body responsible for reviewing and approving all animal research protocols, ensuring they meet ethical standards and regulatory requirements. By reporting the discrepancy, the technician upholds their professional responsibility to animal welfare and regulatory compliance, allowing for a formal assessment and potential amendment of the protocol. This ensures that any changes are made through the proper channels, with appropriate justification and oversight, thereby protecting the animals and the institution. Incorrect approach is analysis. Failing to report the discrepancy and continuing with the modified procedure, even with the intention of improving research outcomes, represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This bypasses the IACUC authority and undermines the entire ethical review process. It implies that the technician believes they have the expertise to unilaterally alter approved protocols, which is a violation of their professional role and the established framework for animal research oversight. This approach risks animal suffering if the modification is detrimental, and it exposes the institution to serious regulatory penalties for non-compliance. Discussing the issue only with colleagues without formally reporting it to the PI or IACUC is also an unacceptable approach. While seeking advice is often beneficial, it does not absolve the technician of their responsibility to ensure the protocol is followed or that any necessary deviations are formally approved. This approach delays proper resolution and leaves the animals in a potentially non-compliant situation. It also fails to engage the appropriate oversight bodies who are legally and ethically mandated to address such issues. Implementing the perceived improvement without any consultation, even if it appears to benefit the animals, is a direct violation of the approved protocol and the ethical review process. The IACUC approval is based on a comprehensive review of the proposed procedures, and any deviation, regardless of intent, requires their re-evaluation. This approach demonstrates a lack of respect for the established regulatory framework and the expertise of the IACUC, potentially leading to unforeseen negative consequences for the animals and the research. Professional reasoning. Professionals in laboratory animal science must prioritize adherence to approved protocols and the established ethical review process. When an operational discrepancy is identified that could impact animal welfare or the integrity of the research, the primary responsibility is to report it through the designated channels. This involves communicating with the principal investigator and, if necessary, the IACUC. This ensures that any necessary adjustments are made transparently, with proper justification, and under the oversight of the responsible committee. This systematic approach safeguards animal welfare, maintains research integrity, and ensures compliance with all applicable regulations. Question 7. Analysis of a situation where a laboratory animal technician observes that a colony of mice, fed according to the standard protocol, appears to be losing weight and exhibiting reduced activity. The technician is responsible for ensuring the animals receive appropriate nutrition as per the research protocol and institutional guidelines. What is the most appropriate course of action for the technician to take? Option A. Adjust the diet to a higher calorie commercial feed without consulting the protocol or veterinarian, believing this will quickly resolve the weight loss. Option B. Continue feeding the same amount of food as before, as the protocol has not been amended, and wait for further instructions from the research staff. Option C. Increase the food ration for all animals in the colony based on the observation of weight loss, assuming they are not receiving enough to eat. Option D. Immediately consult the approved IACUC protocol and the manufacturer's feeding guidelines for the specific diet, while also closely monitoring the animal's condition and reporting any significant changes to the veterinarian or principal investigator. The correct answer is D. Immediately consult the approved IACUC protocol and the manufacturer's feeding guidelines for the specific diet, while also closely monitoring the animal's condition and reporting any significant changes to the veterinarian or principal investigator. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a laboratory animal technician to interpret and apply specific nutritional guidelines for a research animal colony, considering potential health implications and regulatory compliance. The technician must move beyond simply dispensing food to actively assessing the adequacy and appropriateness of the diet based on observed animal health and research protocols, demonstrating a proactive and informed approach to animal welfare and research integrity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves consulting the established Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC, approved protocol, and the manufacturer's feeding guidelines for the specific diet. This is best professional practice because it ensures adherence to the approved research plan, which has undergone rigorous ethical and scientific review. It also prioritizes the use of manufacturer-recommended feeding amounts, which are typically based on scientific data and designed to meet the nutritional needs of the species and strain, thereby promoting optimal health and minimizing confounding variables in research. This aligns with the principles of the Animal Welfare Act, OWA, and the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, which mandate providing appropriate nutrition and monitoring animal health. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely rely on the visual appearance of the animals to adjust food intake. This is professionally unacceptable because visual assessment alone is subjective and may not accurately reflect the animal's nutritional status or underlying health issues. It could lead to over- or underfeeding, potentially compromising animal welfare, impacting research data, and violating the AWA's requirement for proper care and feeding. Another incorrect approach is to continue feeding the same amount as previously, without considering any changes in the animal's condition or the research protocol. This fails to acknowledge that nutritional needs can change due to factors like age, health status, or experimental manipulations. It risks inadequate nutrition or overfeeding, both of which can negatively affect animal health and research outcomes, and demonstrates a lack of proactive animal care as expected under federal regulations. A third incorrect approach is to arbitrarily increase the food ration based on a general assumption that more food is always better. This is professionally unacceptable as it bypasses established guidelines and scientific rationale. Uncontrolled increases in food can lead to obesity, metabolic disorders, and other health problems, directly contradicting the ethical imperative to provide appropriate care and potentially introducing confounding variables into the research. It also disregards the specific nutritional requirements of the species and strain, as outlined in approved protocols and manufacturer guidelines. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach. First, always refer to the approved IACUC protocol for specific dietary instructions. Second, consult the diet manufacturer's guidelines for recommended feeding amounts. Third, observe the animal's health and body condition regularly, noting any deviations from the norm. Fourth, if concerns arise regarding nutrition or animal health, consult with the veterinarian or the principal investigator. This layered approach ensures compliance, promotes animal welfare, and supports the integrity of the research. Question 8. Operational review demonstrates that a planned research protocol involves a procedure known to cause moderate to severe pain in the chosen animal model. While the current standard operating procedures for analgesia are in place, there is emerging literature suggesting more effective pain management strategies and improved post-procedural monitoring techniques that could significantly reduce animal distress. Considering the 3Rs principle, which course of action best upholds ethical and regulatory obligations? Option A. Implement the most refined anesthesia, analgesia, and post-procedural care techniques identified in the latest scientific literature, and consult with veterinary staff to ensure optimal implementation and monitoring for animal well-being. Option B. Conduct a limited search for alternative pain management strategies, but ultimately rely on the established procedures due to time constraints and the need to maintain research momentum. Option C. Argue that the scientific importance of the research justifies the use of standard pain management, as the protocol has already been approved. Option D. Proceed with the protocol using the existing standard operating procedures for analgesia, as they meet the minimum regulatory requirements for animal care. The correct answer is A. Implement the most refined anesthesia, analgesia, and post-procedural care techniques identified in the latest scientific literature, and consult with veterinary staff to ensure optimal implementation and monitoring for animal well-being. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in laboratory animal science where a research protocol requires the use of a specific animal model that is known to cause significant discomfort. The challenge lies in balancing the scientific objectives with the ethical imperative to minimize animal suffering, as mandated by the 3Rs principle. Professional judgment is required to assess whether existing methods adequately address the ethical concerns, or if further refinement is necessary. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of current literature and consultation with veterinary staff and animal welfare experts to identify and implement the most refined methods for anesthesia, analgesia, and post-procedural care. This directly aligns with the refinement principle of the 3Rs, which aims to minimize pain, suffering, and distress experienced by animals. Adhering to established guidelines for humane endpoints and monitoring animal well-being is also crucial. This proactive and evidence-based approach ensures compliance with ethical standards and regulatory frameworks that prioritize animal welfare. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to proceed with the protocol using standard but potentially suboptimal pain management techniques without investigating more advanced options. This fails to uphold the refinement principle by not actively seeking to improve the animal's experience and could lead to unnecessary suffering, violating ethical obligations and potentially regulatory requirements for minimizing distress. Another incorrect approach is to argue that the scientific necessity of the protocol overrides any ethical considerations regarding animal suffering. This demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of the 3Rs, particularly refinement, and disregards the legal and ethical obligations to ensure animal welfare is a primary concern in all research involving animals. Such a stance is professionally unacceptable and ethically indefensible. A third incorrect approach is to assume that simply adhering to the minimum legal requirements for animal care is sufficient, without actively seeking to improve upon those standards. While legal compliance is essential, the 3Rs principle encourages a continuous improvement mindset. Failing to explore and implement more refined methods represents a missed opportunity to enhance animal welfare beyond the baseline, which is a hallmark of responsible animal research. Professional reasoning. Professionals in laboratory animal science must adopt a proactive and critical mindset when reviewing protocols. The decision-making process should involve 1. thoroughly understanding the scientific objectives and the potential impact on animal welfare. 2. Actively researching and evaluating existing and emerging techniques for pain management, anesthesia, and post-procedural care. 3. Consulting with subject matter experts, including veterinarians and animal welfare officers. 4. Prioritizing the implementation of the most refined methods available, even if they require additional resources or training. 5. Continuously monitoring animal well-being and being prepared to adjust procedures or endpoints as necessary. This systematic approach ensures that both scientific advancement and animal welfare are given due consideration. Question 9. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a novel research project has the potential for significant breakthroughs in disease treatment, but the proposed animal model requires a higher number of animals than initially anticipated and involves procedures that may cause discomfort. The research team is eager to begin, citing the potential benefits. What is the most appropriate course of action for the laboratory animal technician to ensure compliance with regulatory and ethical standards? Option A. Ensure the research protocol has received full approval from the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee (IACUC), and that all procedures are meticulously documented and performed according to the approved protocol, prioritizing animal welfare as outlined by the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals. Option B. Suggest to the research team that they proceed with the research and address any potential IACUC concerns after the initial phase of data collection is complete. Option C. Inform the research team that the project can commence immediately, as the potential for significant breakthroughs justifies a slight deviation from standard animal use numbers and comfort protocols. Option D. Proceed with the research as planned, assuming the potential benefits outweigh the increased animal use and discomfort, as the research team has indicated the urgency of the project. The correct answer is A. Ensure the research protocol has received full approval from the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee (IACUC), and that all procedures are meticulously documented and performed according to the approved protocol, prioritizing animal welfare as outlined by the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the ethical imperative of animal welfare with the practical needs of scientific advancement, specifically in the context of informed consent for animal research. The challenge lies in ensuring that the informed consent process, as applied to animal research, is robust, transparent, and ethically sound, even though animals cannot provide consent in the human sense. This necessitates a deep understanding of the regulatory framework governing animal research, which emphasizes the responsibility of researchers and technicians to act in the best interests of the animals and to justify any use of animals. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the ethical and regulatory obligations to minimize animal suffering and to ensure that any research involving animals is scientifically justified and conducted with the highest standards of care. This aligns with the core principles of the Animal Welfare Act, (AWA), and the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, the Guide, which are foundational to laboratory animal science in the U.S. Specifically, the emphasis on a thorough review by an Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, (IACUC), ensures that the proposed research meets stringent ethical and scientific criteria, including the justification for animal use and the implementation of the 3 Rs: replacement, reduction, refinement. The technician's role in this process is to understand and implement the approved protocols, ensuring the welfare of the animals under their care. An incorrect approach that suggests proceeding with research without full IACUC approval or by circumventing established protocols represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This directly violates the AWA, which mandates IACUC oversight for all animal research. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for animal welfare and the principles of responsible research. Another incorrect approach, such as assuming consent based on the availability of animals or the perceived importance of the research, is fundamentally flawed. Animals cannot provide consent, and their use must be rigorously justified and approved. This bypasses the essential ethical review process and undermines the integrity of the research. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a commitment to understanding and adhering to all applicable regulations and ethical guidelines. This includes actively participating in and supporting the IACUC review process, seeking clarification when protocols are unclear, and always prioritizing the welfare of the animals. Professionals should recognize that the informed consent in animal research is a proxy for rigorous ethical review and justification by human representatives, not a direct consent from the animal. When faced with ambiguity or potential ethical conflicts, the professional's duty is to raise concerns through appropriate channels, such as the IACUC or their supervisor, rather than proceeding without proper authorization or ethical consideration. Question 10. Research into the acquisition of a novel rodent species for a research facility has resulted in the arrival of several individuals. The laboratory animal technician is tasked with ensuring their immediate housing and enrichment needs are met. Which of the following approaches best reflects best practice in species-specific care requirements for this new species? Option A. Design housing and select enrichment items based on the general appearance of the rodents and common practices for other rodent species already housed in the facility, assuming similar needs. Option B. Rely on anecdotal advice from colleagues who have previously worked with similar-looking rodents, without independently verifying the information or consulting official guidelines. Option C. Implement basic housing and provide a variety of common enrichment items, such as nesting material and chew toys, and wait for a formal protocol amendment to address any specific species requirements. Option D. Immediately consult the most recent edition of the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals and relevant peer-reviewed literature for established housing and enrichment recommendations for this specific rodent species, and consult with the facility veterinarian regarding any unique husbandry requirements. The correct answer is D. Immediately consult the most recent edition of the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals and relevant peer-reviewed literature for established housing and enrichment recommendations for this specific rodent species, and consult with the facility veterinarian regarding any unique husbandry requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in laboratory animal care, ensuring that the specific housing and enrichment needs of a newly acquired species are met promptly and effectively, even when initial information is limited. The professional challenge lies in balancing the urgency of providing appropriate care with the need for accurate, species-specific knowledge to avoid welfare compromises and regulatory noncompliance. Careful judgment is required to prioritize information gathering and implementation of best practices. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes obtaining validated, species-specific information from authoritative sources before implementing housing and enrichment strategies. This aligns with the ethical imperative to provide the highest standard of care and the regulatory requirement to house animals in conditions that meet their species-specific needs. Consulting established guidelines, veterinary professionals, and experienced colleagues ensures that decisions are evidence-based, minimizing the risk of animal distress, injury, or illness. This proactive and informed approach is fundamental to maintaining animal welfare and adhering to the principles of the Animal Welfare Act, (AWA), and the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, the Guide, which mandate appropriate housing and enrichment. An incorrect approach that involves improvising housing based on general knowledge or the appearance of the animal is professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge the unique biological and behavioral requirements of different species, potentially leading to stress, abnormal behaviors, and health problems. Such an approach directly contravenes the AWA's requirement for adequate housing and the Guide's emphasis on species-appropriate environmental enrichment. Another incorrect approach, such as waiting for a formal protocol amendment before providing enrichment, creates an unnecessary delay in addressing potential welfare deficits. While protocol adherence is crucial, immediate welfare concerns should be addressed through consultation and interim measures if necessary, in line with ethical obligations and the spirit of the regulations. Relying solely on anecdotal information from colleagues without verifying its accuracy or applicability to the specific species also poses a significant risk of misapplication and welfare compromise, failing to meet the standard of care expected under the AWA and the Guide. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Identify the species and any immediate welfare concerns. 2. Consult authoritative resources, e.g., the Guide, peer-reviewed literature, species-specific husbandry manuals. 3. Seek expert advice from veterinarians or experienced animal care staff. 4. Implement evidence-based housing and enrichment strategies. 5. Document all actions and observations. 6. If significant deviations from established protocols are required, initiate the formal amendment process while ensuring immediate welfare needs are met. Question 11. Risk assessment procedures indicate that technician has observed a small, uncontained spill of a liquid reagent in a corridor outside of a designated animal holding room, and there is a possibility that an animal may have come into contact with it before the spill was noticed. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Assume the spill is minor and unlikely to have affected any animals, and continue with routine tasks. Option B. Wait to report the spill until the end of the shift to consolidate reporting and minimize disruption. Option C. Attempt to clean up the spill independently using general cleaning supplies to avoid unnecessary alarm. Option D. Immediately cordon off the affected area, prevent further traffic, and notify veterinary staff and the principal investigator of the affected animal room. The correct answer is D. Immediately cordon off the affected area, prevent further traffic, and notify veterinary staff and the principal investigator of the affected animal room. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in laboratory animal facilities where a potential breach of biosecurity has occurred. The technician must act swiftly and decisively to mitigate risks to animal health, research integrity, and personnel safety. The challenge lies in balancing immediate containment needs with established protocols and the need for accurate reporting, all while operating under the strict regulatory framework governing laboratory animal care and use. Failure to act appropriately can have severe consequences, including disease outbreaks, compromised experimental data, and regulatory noncompliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes immediate containment and notification as per established biosecurity protocols. This aligns with the core principles of disease control and biosecurity, mandated by regulations such as the Animal Welfare Act, OWA, and the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, the Guide, which emphasize preventing the introduction, establishment, and spread of disease. Promptly isolating the affected area and informing the veterinary staff and principal investigator ensures that a coordinated and expert response can be initiated, minimizing potential harm and adhering to the ethical obligation to maintain animal welfare and research integrity. This proactive stance is fundamental to maintaining a controlled research environment. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves delaying reporting to gather more information. This failure directly contravenes regulatory requirements for immediate reporting of suspected health issues or biosecurity breaches. Such delays can allow a potential pathogen to spread, jeopardizing multiple animal colonies and research projects, and violating the ethical imperative to act in the best interest of animal welfare. It also undermines the ability of veterinary staff to intervene effectively and in a timely manner. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to decontaminate the area independently without involving veterinary or supervisory personnel. This bypasses established protocols and the expertise of the veterinary team, who are responsible for determining appropriate decontamination procedures based on the suspected pathogen. Attempting independent decontamination could be ineffective, potentially spread the contaminant further, or even create new hazards, leading to regulatory violations related to inadequate biosecurity and animal care. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the observation as minor without further investigation or reporting. This demonstrates a critical lapse in vigilance and adherence to biosecurity principles. Even seemingly minor deviations can be early indicators of significant health issues or breaches. Failing to report and investigate such observations can lead to the undetected spread of disease, compromising research outcomes and violating the ethical and regulatory duty to maintain a healthy animal population. Professional reasoning. In situations involving potential biosecurity breaches, laboratory animal technicians must follow a clear decision-making process. 1. Observe and document the anomaly. 2. Immediately report the observation to the designated veterinary staff and or supervisor as per facility standard operating procedures, SOP. 3. Follow the instructions of the veterinary staff regarding containment and further actions. 4. Avoid independent interventions that could compromise containment or introduce new risks. This systematic approach ensures that all potential risks are managed by qualified personnel, in accordance with regulatory requirements and best practices for animal welfare and research integrity. Question 12. Compliance review shows a researcher has submitted a protocol proposing a novel surgical procedure on rodents, followed by a euthanasia method that, while effective for tissue collection, has not been explicitly detailed or approved by the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee (IACUC) for this specific application. The researcher believes the method is standard and will not cause undue distress. What is the most appropriate course of action for the laboratory animal technician to recommend to the researcher and the IACUC? Option A. Recommend that the researcher submit a detailed amendment to the IACUC protocol, clearly outlining the proposed euthanasia method, providing scientific justification for its humane application, and exploring any potential refinements or alternatives. Option B. Suggest the researcher consult with colleagues in other institutions to confirm the acceptability of the euthanasia method without involving the IACUC directly at this stage. Option C. Advise the researcher to proceed with the proposed euthanasia method, assuming it is acceptable given its common use in other contexts, and inform the IACUC of the method post-procedure. Option D. Advise the researcher to use a different, more commonly approved euthanasia method that may be less ideal for tissue collection, but is guaranteed to be accepted by the IACUC without further review. The correct answer is C. Advise the researcher to proceed with the proposed euthanasia method, assuming it is acceptable given its common use in other contexts, and inform the IACUC of the method post-procedure. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in laboratory animal welfare, balancing the need for scientific advancement with the ethical and regulatory obligations to minimize animal distress. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying IACUC guidelines, which are designed to be flexible yet stringent, to a situation where a researcher's proposed methodology might inadvertently cause undue suffering. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the proposed protocol adheres to the principles of the 3Rs: replacement, reduction, refinement, and meets the specific requirements of the Animal Welfare Act and the Public Health Service Policy on Humane Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, as overseen by the IACUC. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, evidence-based review of the proposed protocol by the IACUC. This aligns with the core function of the IACUC, to review, approve, and monitor research involving animals. By requiring the researcher to provide detailed justification for the proposed euthanasia method, including scientific rationale and consideration of alternatives, the IACUC ensures that the chosen method is the most humane possible under the circumstances, minimizing pain and distress. This proactive review process is a cornerstone of ethical animal research and regulatory compliance, preventing potential welfare issues before they occur. An incorrect approach that bypasses or inadequately addresses the IACUC review process would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. For instance, proceeding with a method not explicitly approved by the IACUC, or using a method that is known to cause excessive pain or distress without sufficient justification, violates the fundamental principles of animal welfare and the legal requirements for animal research. Such actions could lead to animal suffering, damage the institution's reputation, and result in severe penalties, including suspension of research activities and legal sanctions. Failing to consult with veterinary staff or animal care personnel during the protocol development phase also represents a failure to leverage essential expertise, potentially leading to suboptimal animal care and welfare outcomes. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a commitment to transparency, adherence to established protocols, and open communication. When faced with a novel or potentially controversial research methodology, technicians and researchers should proactively engage with the IACUC, providing all necessary documentation and seeking clarification on guidelines. Consulting with veterinarians and experienced animal care staff is crucial for identifying potential welfare concerns and exploring refined techniques. Prioritizing the ethical treatment of animals and understanding the legal framework governing animal research are paramount. Question 13. Which approach would be most effective in ensuring the psychological well-being of laboratory animals through environmental enrichment, adhering to best practices and regulatory guidelines? Option A. Relying on the availability of pre-approved enrichment items without specific consideration for their suitability or effectiveness for individual species. Option B. Prioritizing the use of the least expensive enrichment options to manage facility budgets, even if their welfare benefits are less certain. Option C. Implementing a diverse range of enrichment items that are rotated regularly, with selection based on species-specific behavioral needs and current scientific literature. Option D. Providing a single, universally approved enrichment item to all species housed within the facility to ensure consistency and ease of management. The correct answer is C. Implementing a diverse range of enrichment items that are rotated regularly, with selection based on species-specific behavioral needs and current scientific literature. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in laboratory animal care, balancing the need for effective environmental enrichment with the practical constraints of a research facility and the specific needs of different species. Professional judgment is required to select an enrichment strategy that is both ethically sound and scientifically appropriate, adhering to regulatory standards. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes species-specific needs and aligns with the principles of the Animal Welfare Act (OWA) and the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, the Guide. The AWA mandates that animals be provided with adequate care and housing, which includes provisions for psychological well-being. The guide further elaborates on environmental enrichment, emphasizing that it should be tailored to the species' natural behaviors and cognitive abilities to reduce stress and promote well-being. Implementing a varied and rotating schedule of enrichment items based on scientific literature and expert consultation ensures that animals are continually stimulated and prevents habituation, thereby maximizing the benefits of enrichment. This proactive and evidence-based approach demonstrates a commitment to animal welfare that is both ethically mandated and regulatory compliant. An incorrect approach that fails to consider species-specific needs is professionally unacceptable. For example, providing the same generic enrichment item to all species, regardless of their natural behaviors or preferences, violates the principles of the guide. This can lead to ineffective enrichment, potential stress, or even harm if the item is inappropriate for the species. Such a failure constitutes a regulatory oversight by not adequately addressing the psychological well-being requirements of the AWA. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on the availability of pre-approved items without considering their suitability or effectiveness for the specific animals is also professionally flawed. This can result in enrichment that is either insufficient or, in some cases, detrimental. Ethically, it represents a passive approach to animal welfare, failing to actively seek out and implement the best possible conditions for the animals. From a regulatory standpoint, it may fall short of the adequate care mandate if the enrichment provided does not demonstrably contribute to the animal's well-being. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes cost-effectiveness over the quality and appropriateness of enrichment items is ethically and regulatorily problematic. While fiscal responsibility is important, it should not supersede the welfare of the animals. The AWA and the guide implicitly require that resources be allocated to ensure adequate care, including effective enrichment. Choosing cheaper, less effective options can be seen as a failure to provide the best possible care, potentially leading to compromised animal welfare and non-compliance with regulatory expectations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the species' natural history, social structure, and behavioral repertoire. This should be followed by a review of current scientific literature and best practice guidelines for environmental enrichment for that specific species. Consultation with veterinarians, animal behaviorists, and the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC, is crucial. A systematic approach to selecting, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating the effectiveness of enrichment strategies, with a commitment to continuous improvement, is essential for upholding both ethical standards and regulatory requirements. Question 14. The review process indicates that a laboratory animal technician has observed a subtle but persistent change in the feeding behavior of a specific mouse, which has not been reported to the veterinarian or supervisor as it is not a dramatic change. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance and ethical animal care standards for animal health monitoring? Option A. Immediately document the observation in the animal's health record and report it to the attending veterinarian for assessment, as per established institutional protocols. Option B. Continue to monitor the animal closely for a few more days to see if the feeding behavior returns to normal before reporting it. Option C. Only report the feeding behavior change if the animal shows other more obvious signs of illness, such as lethargy or weight loss. Option D. Assume the change is insignificant as the animal is still active and appears otherwise healthy, and therefore no immediate action is required. The correct answer is A. Immediately document the observation in the animal's health record and report it to the attending veterinarian for assessment, as per established institutional protocols. Explanation: the review process indicates a potential lapse in adhering to established animal health monitoring protocols. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the technician to balance immediate operational demands with the long-term welfare of the animals and compliance with regulatory standards. A technician must exercise careful judgment to ensure that any deviation from protocol is justified, documented, and does not compromise animal health or research integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the systematic and documented observation of animals for signs of illness or distress, which is a fundamental requirement of animal welfare regulations and good laboratory practice. This approach ensures that any health anomalies are identified early, allowing for prompt intervention, minimizing suffering, and maintaining the validity of research data. Adherence to established protocols, including frequency of observation and specific parameters to monitor, is mandated by guidelines such as those outlined by the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, the Guide, and Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC, protocols, which are overseen by the Animal Welfare Act, AWA, in the U.S. An incorrect approach that involves delaying the reporting of subtle but persistent changes in an animal's behavior or appearance is professionally unacceptable. This failure directly contravenes the ethical obligation to prevent animal suffering and the regulatory requirement for timely reporting of health issues. Such delays can lead to the progression of disease, increased pain, and potentially the need for euthanasia, all of which are preventable with prompt action. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on visual checks without a structured, documented system, risks overlooking critical indicators of ill health. This lack of systematic monitoring is a failure to meet the standards of care expected under the AWA and institutional guidelines, which emphasize comprehensive health surveillance. Finally, an approach that assumes an animal is healthy without proper observation, simply because it is not exhibiting overt signs of distress, is a dangerous assumption that can lead to significant welfare compromises and regulatory noncompliance. It bypasses the proactive nature of animal health monitoring, which is designed to detect issues before they become severe. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of all applicable regulations and institutional policies regarding animal health monitoring. This includes knowing the specific parameters to observe, the required frequency of observation, and the established reporting procedures. When faced with a situation that deviates from the norm, the technician should first assess the potential impact on animal welfare and research integrity. Documentation is paramount. Any observations, actions taken, and communications with supervisors or veterinarians must be meticulously recorded. If there is any doubt about the significance of an observation or the appropriate course of action, the technician should err on the side of caution and consult with their supervisor or the attending veterinarian. This proactive and documented approach ensures accountability and upholds the highest standards of animal care and regulatory compliance. Question 15. The analysis reveals that a laboratory animal technician observed several animals in a specific research colony exhibiting unusual lethargy, reduced food intake, and abnormal fecal consistency. The technician suspects a potential infectious disease outbreak. Considering the regulatory framework for laboratory animal care and use, which of the following actions is the most appropriate immediate response? Option A. Initiate a broad-spectrum antibiotic treatment across the entire research colony to preemptively address any potential bacterial infection. Option B. Immediately isolate the affected animals from the rest of the colony and promptly report the observations and suspected outbreak to the institutional veterinarian and the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, IACUC, according to established institutional protocols. Option C. Continue routine animal care and monitoring, assuming the symptoms are transient and will resolve on their own, while documenting the observations in the animal health records. Option D. Euthanize the visibly ill animals to prevent further spread and minimize potential suffering without consulting veterinary staff. The correct answer is B. Immediately isolate the affected animals from the rest of the colony and promptly report the observations and suspected outbreak to the institutional veterinarian and the institutional animal care, and use committee IACUC, according to established institutional protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a significant professional challenge due to the immediate threat to animal welfare, research integrity, and potentially human health. Depending on the nature of the outbreak, the technician must act decisively and accurately under pressure, adhering strictly to established protocols. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of the situation with the need for methodical, evidence-based action, ensuring all stakeholders are informed and involved appropriately. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes immediate containment and notification, as mandated by regulatory frameworks governing laboratory animal care and use. Promptly isolating affected animals and reporting the suspected outbreak to the designated institutional officials, e.g., veterinarian, IACUC, is a fundamental requirement. This ensures that the institution can activate its comprehensive outbreak response plan, which typically involves veterinary assessment, diagnostic testing, and implementation of control measures. This aligns with the ethical imperative to minimize animal suffering and maintain the integrity of research data, as well as regulatory obligations to report and manage animal health issues. An incorrect approach that involves delaying notification or attempting to manage the outbreak independently without consulting the institutional veterinarian or IACUC represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Regulations such as the Animal Welfare Act, AWA, in the U.S., and similar legislation in other jurisdictions mandate reporting of animal health issues. Failure to do so can result in non-compliance, penalties, and compromise the institution's ability to obtain or maintain accreditation. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the established chain of command and the expertise of veterinary professionals, potentially leading to inadequate treatment, spread of disease, and prolonged animal suffering. Another incorrect approach, such as immediately euthanizing all animals without veterinary confirmation or a clear directive from the institutional outbreak response team, is also professionally unacceptable. This action bypasses essential diagnostic steps, potentially leading to unnecessary loss of valuable research animals and data. It also fails to consider less drastic but effective control measures that a veterinarian might recommend. This demonstrates a lack of adherence to established protocols and a failure to exercise sound professional judgment based on veterinary expertise and institutional policy. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the institution's standard operating procedures, SOP, for outbreak response. This includes knowing who to contact immediately, e.g., attending veterinarian IACUC administrator, and what initial steps to take, e.g., isolation of affected animals, enhanced biosecurity measures. Professionals should rely on their training and the established hierarchy of authority within the research facility. If unsure, seeking guidance from supervisors or the designated veterinary staff is paramount. The decision-making framework should be: 1. Recognize the potential problem. 2. Consult relevant SOPs and protocols. 3. Take immediate, appropriate containment actions. 4. Notify the designated authorities without delay. 5. Follow the directives of veterinary and institutional leadership. Question 16. Governance review demonstrates that a newly arrived rodent exhibiting subtle, nonspecific signs of lethargy and a slightly rough coat has been housed in the general quarantine area for 48 hours. The animal has not yet been formally assessed by veterinary staff, and no diagnostic samples have been collected. The technician is aware that other animals are due to be moved into adjacent bays within the next 24 hours. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Immediately initiate a full quarantine assessment, including veterinary examination and sample collection, and prevent any movement of animals into or out of the affected quarantine bay until the assessment is complete. Option B. Observe the animal for another 24 hours to see if the signs resolve spontaneously before initiating any further diagnostic procedures or altering housing plans. Option C. Inform the facility manager of the situation and await their direct instruction on how to proceed, as this situation involves potential deviation from standard intake procedures. Option D. Proceed with the planned movement of other animals into adjacent bays, as the observed signs are not definitive for a serious illness, and the quarantine period is intended for observation. The correct answer is A. Immediately initiate a full quarantine assessment, including veterinary examination and sample collection, and prevent any movement of animals into or out of the affected quarantine bay until the assessment is complete. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in laboratory animal facilities, balancing the need for efficient operations with the absolute imperative of maintaining biosecurity and animal welfare during quarantine. The technician must make a critical decision based on incomplete information, where a wrong choice could have significant consequences for animal health, research integrity, and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in interpreting the available data, understanding the potential risks, and applying established protocols to mitigate those risks effectively. The correct approach prioritizes the established quarantine protocols and the potential for disease transmission. By initiating a full quarantine assessment and delaying any interanimal contact, the technician upholds the core principles of biosecurity and disease prevention, which are paramount in laboratory animal science. This aligns directly with regulatory requirements designed to protect animal health and research validity. Ethically, it demonstrates a commitment to preventing suffering and ensuring the integrity of the research by avoiding the introduction of unknown pathogens. This approach represents best professional practice because it adheres strictly to the established framework for managing potentially infectious animals, thereby safeguarding the entire colony and the research it supports. An incorrect approach would involve making assumptions about the animal's health status without proper verification. For instance, proceeding with routine housing or allowing contact with other animals based solely on the absence of overt clinical signs would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This bypasses the fundamental purpose of quarantine, which is to detect and contain subclinical or early-stage infections. Such an action directly violates guidelines that mandate strict isolation and observation periods for newly arrived animals or those suspected of illness. It also fails to uphold the ethical responsibility to prevent the spread of disease, which could lead to widespread animal suffering and compromised research outcomes. Another incorrect approach might be to rely on anecdotal information or the opinion of a less experienced colleague without consulting official protocols or veterinary guidance. This demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and a disregard for the systematic, evidence-based approach required in animal care. It undermines the established hierarchy of decision-making and the importance of adhering to documented procedures. The professional reasoning framework for this situation involves a systematic risk assessment. First, identify the potential risks associated with the observed signs and the animal's history. Second, consult the established standard operating procedures, SOP, for quarantine and animal health monitoring. Third, evaluate the available information against these SOPs. Fourth, if there is any ambiguity or potential for risk, err on the side of caution by implementing stricter containment and diagnostic measures. Finally, communicate any concerns or decisions to the appropriate personnel, such as the veterinarian or facility manager, to ensure proper oversight and guidance. Question 17. Benchmark analysis indicates that a laboratory animal technician performing routine health assessments on a colony of C57BL/6 mice notices that one mouse in a cage appears slightly lethargic and has a ruffled coat, which is a subtle departure from its usual alert demeanor and smooth fur. The technician has observed this animal daily for the past 2 weeks, and this is the first time such an observation has been made. Option A. Inform a fellow technician about the observation during a break, and together decide whether it warrants reporting to the veterinarian based on their collective experience. Option B. Immediately administer a broad-spectrum antibiotic to the mouse, as this is a common treatment for general signs of illness in mice, and then inform the veterinarian of the action taken. Option C. Document the observation in the animal's health record, noting the specific signs and the date/time, and then consult with the facility veterinarian to discuss the findings and receive guidance on further action. Option D. Assume the mouse is simply tired or experiencing a minor, transient discomfort, and continue to monitor it without immediate documentation or veterinary consultation, planning to reevaluate in 24 hours. The correct answer is C. Document the observation in the animal's health record, noting the specific signs and the date/time, and then consult with the facility veterinarian to discuss the findings and receive guidance on further action. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in laboratory animal care, where a technician observes a subtle, yet potentially significant, deviation from an animal's normal health status. The challenge lies in accurately interpreting the observation, understanding its potential implications for the animal's welfare and the integrity of research, and determining the appropriate course of action within the established regulatory framework. The technician must balance the need for timely intervention with the risk of overreporting or misinterpreting minor variations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach, which involves documenting the observation thoroughly and consulting with the veterinarian, represents best professional practice because it adheres strictly to the principles of animal welfare and regulatory compliance. The Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, the guide, mandates regular observation of animals for signs of distress or illness. Documenting the observation provides a clear, objective record for future reference and for the veterinarian's assessment. Consulting the veterinarian ensures that a qualified professional makes the diagnosis and treatment decisions, aligning with the veterinarian's oversight role as outlined in federal regulations and institutional policies. This collaborative approach minimizes the risk of delayed treatment or unnecessary intervention, safeguarding both animal welfare and research validity. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to dismiss the observation as insignificant without further investigation. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for diligent observation and could lead to the progression of a treatable condition, violating the ethical obligation to prevent animal suffering. It also undermines the scientific integrity of the research by potentially allowing an animal's health status to impact experimental outcomes without proper management. Another incorrect approach is to immediately administer a treatment without veterinary consultation. This is a direct violation of veterinary oversight requirements. The Guide and federal regulations, e.g., the Animal Welfare Act and the Public Health Service Policy on Humane Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, clearly delineate the veterinarian's role in diagnosing and prescribing treatments. Unauthorized treatment can be ineffective, harmful, or mask symptoms, hindering proper diagnosis and potentially leading to adverse drug reactions or complications. A third incorrect approach is to only report the observation verbally to a colleague without formal documentation or veterinary consultation. While communication is important, a verbal report alone is insufficient. It lacks the objective, permanent record required for tracking animal health trends, for regulatory compliance audits, and for ensuring continuity of care if the primary observer is unavailable. This approach risks the observation being forgotten or misinterpreted, delaying necessary veterinary intervention. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process when encountering such situations. This involves 1. Diligent observation, actively and regularly observing animals for any deviations from normal behavior, appearance, or physiological parameters. 2. Objective documentation, immediately and accurately recording all observations, including the date, time, animal identification, specific details of the observation, and the observer's name. 3. Assessment of significance, evaluating the observation in the context of the animal's species, age, health history, and the research protocol. 4. Consultation and reporting, consulting with the veterinarian or designated personnel as per institutional standard operating procedures, SOP, and reporting findings promptly. 5. Following instructions, implementing the veterinarian's recommendations for further observation, treatment, or adjustments to care. This framework ensures that animal welfare is prioritized, regulatory requirements are met, and research integrity is maintained. Question 18. During the evaluation of a research project's daily animal care logs, a laboratory animal technician notices a discrepancy between the recorded feed quantity for a specific cage and the expected quantity based on the animal's protocol. The recorded quantity is significantly lower than anticipated. What is the most appropriate course of action for the technician to take? Option A. Ignore the discrepancy, as it is a minor detail and unlikely to significantly impact the research outcome. Option B. Immediately adjust the log to reflect the expected quantity, assuming a recording error, and proceed with daily duties. Option C. Manually alter the log to match the expected quantity without any further investigation or documentation. Option D. Investigate the discrepancy by checking the feed inventory, verifying the weighing procedure, and consulting the animal protocol for any recent changes, documenting all findings and proposed corrections. correct answer is B. Immediately adjust the log to reflect the expected quantity, assuming a recording error, and proceed with daily duties. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in research environments where data integrity and compliance are paramount. The technician is faced with a discrepancy that could impact the validity of experimental results and potentially lead to noncompliance with institutional policies and federal regulations governing animal research. The professional challenge lies in accurately identifying the source of the error, rectifying it appropriately, and ensuring that all actions are documented and transparent, without compromising the integrity of the research or the welfare of the animals. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and transparent process of investigation and correction. This aligns with the principles of good laboratory practice, GLP, and institutional standard operating procedures, SOP, for data management. By meticulously reviewing all relevant records, identifying the specific error, and documenting the correction with a clear explanation and justification, the technician upholds the highest standards of data integrity. This approach ensures that the research data remains accurate, reliable, and auditable, which is crucial for scientific validity and regulatory compliance. Furthermore, it demonstrates a commitment to ethical research practices by proactively addressing potential issues that could affect animal welfare or research outcomes. Incorrect approach is analysis, failing to investigate the discrepancy and proceeding with the experiment as if no error occurred represents a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This approach compromises data integrity, potentially leading to flawed research conclusions and misinformed scientific decisions, violates the principles of accurate record-keeping and transparency required by regulatory bodies. Attempting to correct the data without proper documentation or justification is also professionally unacceptable. This action can be construed as data falsification or manipulation, which is a serious ethical breach and a violation of regulatory requirements. It undermines the audit trail and makes it impossible to verify the accuracy of the research findings. Ignoring the discrepancy and hoping it goes unnoticed is a dereliction of professional duty. This passive approach allows potential errors to persist, jeopardizing the validity of the research and potentially leading to noncompliance if discovered during an audit. It fails to uphold the technician's responsibility to ensure accurate and reliable data. Professional reasoning. Professionals in laboratory animal science must adopt a proactive and meticulous approach to data management. When discrepancies arise, the decision-making process should involve 1. Immediate identification and acknowledgement of the issue. 2. Thorough investigation to determine the root cause. 3. Consultation with supervisors or principal investigators as per institutional SOPs. 4. Accurate and documented correction of the error with clear justification. And 5. Ensuring all actions are recorded in the appropriate logs and databases. This systematic process ensures accountability, maintains data integrity, and upholds ethical and regulatory standards. Question 19. System analysis indicates that the environmental control systems in 2 separate animal housing rooms have begun to show intermittent fluctuations. Room A's temperature is occasionally dropping below the acceptable range for the species housed, while Room B's humidity levels are intermittently exceeding the recommended parameters. Both rooms house distinct research projects with different animal models. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the laboratory animal technician? Option A. Attempt to independently troubleshoot and repair both environmental control systems using available resources and personal knowledge before reporting the issues to veterinary staff or supervisors. Option B. Focus on addressing the temperature fluctuations in Room A first, as temperature deviations can have more immediate and severe consequences for animal health and survival, and address Room B's humidity issues once Room A is stabilized. Option C. Immediately initiate a detailed risk assessment for both rooms, prioritizing the room with the most critical impact on animal welfare and research integrity, and consult with veterinary staff and supervisors to develop a comprehensive action plan for immediate and long-term solutions. Option D. Continue to monitor both rooms closely without immediate intervention, assuming the fluctuations are minor and will self-correct, to avoid disrupting ongoing research activities. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a detailed risk assessment for both rooms, prioritizing the room with the most critical impact on animal welfare and research integrity, and consult with veterinary staff and supervisors to develop a comprehensive action plan for immediate and long-term solutions. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in laboratory animal facilities, ensuring the continuous functionality of critical equipment that directly impacts animal welfare and research integrity. The technician must balance immediate operational needs with long-term preventative maintenance and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in prioritizing actions when multiple equipment issues arise, potentially affecting different animal groups or research protocols. Careful judgment is required to assess the severity of each issue, its potential impact, and the resources available for repair or replacement. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, risk-based assessment. This aligns with the principles of good laboratory animal care and management, which emphasize proactive identification and mitigation of risks to animal welfare and research data. By documenting the issues and assessing their impact on animal well-being and experimental integrity, the technician ensures that decisions are informed and defensible, prioritizing repairs based on the severity of the risk to animals and research, and then implementing a plan for both immediate action and future preventative maintenance, demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and ethical animal care. This approach minimizes the potential for animal suffering, research disruption, and non-compliance with established guidelines. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the most visible or easily fixable issue fails to address the potential cascading effects of other equipment malfunctions. This could lead to prolonged periods of suboptimal environmental conditions for animals, compromising their health and the validity of research. It also neglects the importance of a comprehensive maintenance program, which is often a requirement under animal welfare regulations. Another incorrect approach, which involves delaying reporting or addressing issues due to workload, is ethically and regulatorily unacceptable. Animal welfare cannot be compromised by administrative burdens. Prompt reporting and action are essential to prevent suffering and ensure compliance with the Animal Welfare Act and the Guide for the Care and Use of Laboratory Animals, which mandate appropriate housing and environmental conditions. Failing to involve veterinary staff or supervisors in significant equipment failures is also a critical oversight. These individuals are crucial resources for assessing the impact on animal health and for making informed decisions about resource allocation and repair priorities. This failure can lead to inadequate solutions and potential breaches of ethical and regulatory standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. First, identify all equipment malfunctions. Second, assess the immediate and potential impact of each malfunction on animal welfare, e.g., temperature, humidity, ventilation, water access, and research integrity. Third, consult with veterinary staff and supervisors to determine the severity and priority of each issue. Fourth, develop an action plan that includes immediate corrective measures, necessary repairs, and a schedule for preventative maintenance. Finally, document all issues, actions taken, and decisions made. Question 20. Strategic planning requires a laboratory animal technician to anticipate and respond to situations where an animal exhibits signs of distress that deviate from its normal behavior during a routine husbandry procedure. If an animal appears to be in pain or discomfort, what is the most appropriate and compliant course of action? Option A. Administer a pain relief medication from the general supply without consulting the veterinarian, assuming it will alleviate the discomfort. Option B. Continue with the scheduled husbandry procedure as planned, assuming the animal will adapt to the discomfort. Option C. Immediately consult with the attending veterinarian to report the observed distress and seek guidance on appropriate intervention, documenting all observations and actions. Option D. Record the animal's distress in the daily log but take no immediate action, waiting to see if the condition resolves on its own. The correct answer is C. Immediately consult with the attending veterinarian to report the observed distress and seek guidance on appropriate intervention, documenting all observations and actions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a laboratory animal technician to balance the immediate needs of an animal with the established protocols and regulatory requirements for animal care. The technician must exercise sound judgment to determine the most appropriate course of action when faced with a deviation from standard practice, considering both animal welfare and compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing the animal's immediate welfare while adhering to the established regulatory framework. By consulting with the veterinarian and documenting the intervention, the technician ensures that the animal receives necessary care promptly and that the deviation from protocol is properly recorded and justified, aligning with the principles of responsible animal care and regulatory oversight. This proactive communication and documentation are critical for maintaining animal health records and ensuring accountability. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves administering medication without veterinary consultation. This fails to comply with regulatory requirements that mandate veterinary oversight for all therapeutic interventions. It poses a significant ethical risk by potentially administering incorrect dosages or inappropriate medications, which could harm the animal and violate the principles of humane care. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the animal's distress and continue with the scheduled procedure. This directly violates the ethical obligation to alleviate animal suffering and the regulatory imperative to ensure animal welfare. It demonstrates a failure to recognize and respond to signs of distress, which is a core competency for a laboratory animal technician. A third incorrect approach is to document the distress but take no immediate action. While documentation is important, it is insufficient when an animal is clearly suffering. This approach fails to meet the immediate welfare needs of the animal and neglects the technician's responsibility to intervene and seek appropriate veterinary guidance. It represents a passive approach that is contrary to the active care and oversight required by regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with recognizing signs of animal distress or deviation from expected norms. This should be immediately followed by consulting relevant standard operating procedures, SOP, and regulatory guidelines. If the situation warrants immediate intervention beyond standard SOPs, the next critical step is to consult with the attending veterinarian. All actions taken, including observations, interventions, and consultations, must be meticulously documented. This systematic approach ensures that animal welfare is prioritized, regulatory compliance is maintained, and a clear record of care is established.